My name is Maura Keefe. I'm one of the scholars in residence. In one of yet another exciting first for The Pillow, it is the first time we have zoomed in an artist from overseas. This is Una Doherty, everybody. So thankfully her baby is sleeping, so she's able to join us. Una, we had a really powerful experience today in the theater, and I'm really grateful that you have sent us Navy Blue and Hope Hunt. And a couple of dancers will be joining us in a moment, but I wanted to start by asking you if you could say something about what it was like for you to start making this work by yourself in the studio, building the movement material, and then starting to work with a group of a dozen dancers, and how different that is from your solo practice.
I guess, yes. I was making it on my own in lockdown, but I guess I made a lot of it on my own. I mean, I probably always do this anyway, but I guess I was afraid of having 12 in front of me. So I made the show on my own thinking I would then get rid of it when I knew them and we were friends enough to collaborate. But that first week I was afraid of.
Because I've been thinking in watching it is that you had also the chance to have an outside eye rather than just the embodied experience of doing it, so that your sense of staging could change and really looking at the bodies working with each other since you're not in the work. Did that shift things for you to be able to, I mean, the visual sense of it is so important to this work.
So what's the question? Is it important to be outside and not dancing in the work?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Hope Hunt I made on a friend, and then he got a better job, so that's why I ended up doing it. Same with Hard to Be Soft. The solo I did in Hard to Be Soft was because the guy who was doing it got a better job. So I think when I was making, I was never meant to be on stage. I would never be able to do that double.
So the Hope Hunt you're talking about in particular, that solo you built with a male dancer who you were intending to have perform it?
Yeah. Neil Brown did the first couple of shows. He's from Glasgow, so it was me and Neil riffing on our childhood in Glasgow and Belfast. So the show was built for him. And then he got a different gig. So I just did it for him once in Galway. And then people were like, oh, it's about gender. But it was because Neil left. Yeah.
So I mean, Satie is going to tell us a little bit about what it was like to inherit the role from you, but could you say something about what it was like to decide to give it to another dancer? I mean, you intended it for Neil, then it really became you and a signature work for you, and then you've given it to Satie since 2020. Could you talk a little bit about that, letting go of something that was so much tied to your identity, at least in the press and for audiences?
Yeah, but it was so enjoyable because it's so enjoyable to give a show that you know so well, that you've done like over hundreds and hundreds of times, so you know what their little toe is supposed to feel. So then it's nice because you feel so confident to give it, because any question you're like, I know what you mean. Here, one day I did this, the next day I did that. So because I grew up in it, then it felt like you don't self-sabotage, or you don't doubt yourself as a maker or anything, because you're like, I know this show, I can give it. Mm-hmm. So it felt good.
So then in selecting the dancers for Navy Blue, what kinds of things were you looking for with the dancers in that cast?
Yeah, so what we did in the audition is you had to come in and you had to learn a little bit of part one. So I was kind of looking for like line. Can you do a clean, like classic dancing technique? And then for part three is like, I guess I'm going to call it a technique. It's a thing I invented called strings, which is I don't have the right terminology to explain myself here, lads, but it's like it's a full-bodied experience which results in a certain type of sporadic movement, Jackson Pollock movement, that is sincere to following feeling and not form. So I gave them that dense improvisation to see if they could do the ballet at the start and they could still sink their soul into that. And if they could do those two things, then at the end of the day, we just put groovy music on and made them flock together to see if they could let go of the ego and not be a soloist and listen to each other. And if you could do all three of those things, then it means you can dance and have empathy and look after each other, and you'd have a good time on tour.
Well, they've just joined us, so they flocked beautifully. So thank you for.
I'm frozen. Hey, zooming in. Hey guys.
So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and then we'll continue the conversation among all of us. Thank you for joining us. Beautiful, beautiful dancing. Could you please introduce yourself, say your birth country and where you live now?
Hi, everyone. My name is Magdalena. I'm born in Germany and I live in Brussels in Belgium. And I'm understudy for Navy Blue of Una Doherty.
Hi, my name's Thibaut. I was born in France, but I grew up in the States, and I now live in Paris.
And hi, I'm Mathilde. I was born in France and I live in France.
Thank you. So we were just talking about the audition process for Navy Blue, and one of the things that Una was saying is first you had to have the clean line of dancing technique clear for that, but then also an ability to flock and be in a group. And I'm wondering if you could start by talking about the negotiation of that unison in the flocking. Maybe Magdalena, you say something about that to start. What it was like to have this very independent action, but then also the unison of the group, and what that was like in building the work.
I mean, I felt it was certainly a kind of contradiction within a setting of an audition, but what I found really challenging until today, I guess, is that everybody in a flock feels like responsible or has the feeling of responsibility, but it still needs to be somehow able to be shared. So this is a never-ending challenge that started in the audition, and I feel like it goes on till now.
Thibaut, do you want to say something about the kind of the collective and the unison? I mean, you have an exquisite solo, which also a pillow first for me. I think of it as the what the fuck solo, as that comes out in the text, and then you have this explosive thing that happens. So those feel like those are sort of counter, like a contradiction almost.
I think by flocking, we develop a sense of listening to each other that then you can actually take into listening to like your own personalities almost. Like it's the same sense of listening that you can bring into a solo to just almost listen to like your instincts and maybe let the first one go and go with like the second, just like you would do that same kind of listening when you're in a group.
Una, one of the things I was thinking about in coming out of the pandemic when we all were in such small groups of pods or maybe by ourselves, and then to have to remind dancers how to work together, it feels like that even more than the sense of line and technique is something about how to rebuild the connection across people. Why was that of interest to you for this work, that sense of collective?
You know what, I'm going to be honest. I think the collective in this group, because very early on in like my ideas of the show is I knew about the gunshots really early. So I really wanted to build a community that you would give a shit about. You know, because it's so the repetition, it's very like in the mood, like in film, I'm not going to say this right. When you repeat something on stage, then from the viewer, you can become numb to what it means or what it feels very quickly. So by Gunshot 3, you can see the structure, and the structure is louder than the immediacy. So I wanted to build a community that the audience cared about. And I think you would care about them if they cared about each other, something, if that makes sense.
Today also about who they are when they leave the group after the gunshot. Thibaut, you disappear sort of quickly from the collective, and Magdalena, you're there to the end, and it feels like both are kind of challenging to have to be part of the topography of the stage, but then also to have to keep going. Maybe you could say something about those, like those places in leaving the group or having to persist.
It's definitely a whole narrative, inner narrative, depending on when do you leave, do you drop out. In the same time, I feel even though you drop out, you're not leaving. Like, you're not leaving the stage. You kind of stay present and put a volume up to the sensations that the group that you left behind is still going through. So, I mean, obviously, I feel the more people that leave, the more intense the emotional journey is in this kind of simulative, situational context. Yeah.
Do you want to, yeah.
Yeah, I also feel like, also in a very simple way, like the more we are dancing collectively, the more we feel also hidden inside the group, and the less there is people, the more we feel vulnerable and exposed to this space that is the stage, and that is already very exposed space. So I feel like the big unison of the first part is a place where we are super tuned to the technique and to the specificity of everything, and as soon as we have this one thing, this one moment where we know we are just stepping a little bit out of the unison, it's so strong how we feel in the body, this exposure and this vulnerability, and I think it's a place also to we can reflect in outside of the stage of how we feel hidden in the group, and as soon as we step out, we're like, very exposed.
I wanted to say something about the collectiveness that you mentioned before. I feel in this projection, part of it doesn't only reflect in the work, it also comes with us being on tour on a big group. So that's something I really appreciate, and I don't know if it was directly linked to the pandemic, where dancers were somehow it was not easy to work in groups, that it was like an action to be playing, like to spend money on people, not on expensive set or any effect, any shishi, my ballet teacher would say, like that the collectiveness and the solidarity with each other reflects not only on what is on stage, but also how we go on tour.
That's great. I was going to ask about the collaboration also, Una, with the scenic designer that we see for Ascending into Lazarus, the gorgeous lighting design and projection design, and sound design. Like, you really have, you build relationships with collaborators. Let's talk about Navy Blue, since we are the first audiences in the United States seeing it. Could you talk a little bit about how you invited Jamie XX into the process, and then how you invited the projection designer into the process?
So Nadia, the projectionist, Gabrielle found him. She knew him. It's a mate of her brother. Well, I just knew that I wanted it to bleed, and to look wet. I mean, we had this whole idea at the beginning that there would be blood bags and all this kind of thing, but we went with projection, and Nadia's very good. He does work that goes all across huge buildings and stuff, and cityscapes. And he was brilliant. We went to his studio, and he was actually dropping drops of paint, and then with a blow machine, blowing it and then filming it from above. He was like blowing the paint and then putting that into the computer and turning it into a projection so that it came from actual liquid dripping. He's a genius. And Jamie, I did a music video for Jamie. I had just done a music video for Jamie at the beginning of 2020. So I was like, he owes me one, so I could ask him. Yeah.
Thibaut, I have to ask you a question, because this is not the first time you've been here on this stage. You've been at To the Pillow before. We like to count Thibaut as one of our success stories. You were a student in the school at Jacob's Pillow and have returned, right? You've returned with Ballet BC and the Batsheva Ensemble. Could you say something about what it's like to join a new collective and how those, how those experiences kind of layer on top of each other?
Yeah, I'll try not to get too personal here. Well, I feel really grateful for this festival, first of all, and I mean it's very meaningful to come back with this group because I think the message is something that I think for the first time feels like I really took part in the creation in a way that was never asked of me before on a human level. With this group of people, we didn't like try to create something that was outside of us. It's from us. Like this hug at the end is because one day in the studio, Una saw us and said, go hug him, It was natural. Like everything feels like a reflection of what actually happened in my life. So I feel even more humbled to be here sharing this because it feels like the truth in a way. But it's always a beautiful experience.
Una, last question. Tell us about what's next with Navy Blue and what's next for you and your dancers.
I think Navy Blue has a big long tour. I think you have loads of gigs to do.
we heard the price tag, so yeah.
Yeah, they have loads of gigs to do. So that's brilliant. That will be the biggest tour I've ever been part of. Big thanks to Gabrielle, who's our producer, who's a machine and push it like that. And I've been in a couple of shows where you get to do it's like a theatre show. So you do like a 2 or 3 week run. And I don't know about everybody else there, but that was very rare for me. Normally when I was in a dance show, you do 3 nights. It was always 3 nights. And there's something about you going to Jacobs and doing 7 in a row and see when you go through that and in the middle of the week, you have to go out of the honeymoon period of the show and then back in again. I think that can feed the dancer a lot, regardless of what the show is, to go through that wall with it. That's really cool to do. Jacobs in America, you used to do these week runs, and that's class. So maybe we've got a lot more gigs to go, but I think going through the wall of a 7-night run will serve them well for the rest of the tour. It might feel different, I hope, after that.
Oh, well, we can all attest to how they're dancing beautifully together, and I think even deepening from opening night. So I'm sure you're getting that report from people other than me. We are delighted to have it here. You should all come back and see it again this weekend. And Una, so glad you could join us.
Maybe I'll just say, if anybody was thinking about coming back, the end solo changes every 2 nights. So in a sense, your full stop at the meaning of the end of the show does change depending on the performer. So it's worth another ticket, lads.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Thanks, folks.